In our Sunday school hour, we heard this morning the beginning of a series, Paul versus Plato. That has to do with what we're talking about this morning, as we'll get to Psalm 15 here in just a moment. Before we get there, and I failed to bring up a copy of the bulletin, there's a few things that I want to talk about. In the bulletin, you have a quote from David Livingstone. There, thank you. Thanks, John. Here it is. Missionaries in the midst of masses of heathenism seem like voices crying in the wilderness. Seems that way. Yesterday, spent a little time, along with Luke, down in Washington, D.C., and a huge abolitionist rally going on there. I say huge, maybe 300 people from all over the U.S. 300 people from all over the U.S. is not that many people. That's like a dot on a dot on a dot on a dot, maybe. And there are people there from the Dakotas and Arizona and other places as well, Florida as well. This idea of restoring the republic, if you will, or restoring righteousness, or doing righteousness, seems like such a small thing. Just yesterday, now Washington, D.C. is a little bit different from Lancaster County, PA. Lancaster County people will show you resistance with perhaps hand motions or an occasional comment. In D.C., it's a whole lot different. You have people that want to yell and scream at you and mock you and so forth and call you the bad guy for even being there at all. Now, why do I say this morning? Oh, by the way, our abolition outreach next week will be in Lancaster Square, not Mannheim. That was the last time. So I hope you all can join us on that, or at least some of you anyway. Now, what are we talking about here this morning? Paul in Romans 1 through 3 has, shall we say, really bad things to say about humanity. Now, in chapter 2, he has the things to say which might be the worst of all in the sense, is that he's calling out the hypocrisy of people who say, one thing is bad, you shouldn't do this, and yet you do the same. In our soundbite culture, in our world today, it's good enough if you just say the right things. Paul's saying, no. You judge someone else, but you do it, you're just as bad. Oh, but I'm saying, I'm talking, I'm a good talker, I'm a good yakmeister. Paul's saying, not good enough. You have to do what you say. You've got to do it. It's one of the reasons why pastors are held, shall we say, to a higher standard. It's one of the reasons why when we have the qualifications, shall we say, in 1 Timothy and also in Titus, 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1, we have qualifications that are done. Yeah, have you ever noticed that? It's qualifications out of what you do. Not a striker, not given to much wine, this kind of a thing, right? A godly husband, godly father. It's what you do, not what you are good at really talking about and sounding all articulate about. No, it's what you do. And I find it amazing, just as a side note here, I find it amazing to me that generally speaking, when a church goes for a new pastor, what they want to know is their education. They're not as interested in what they do, like the Bible is, or what they've done. They're more interested in where they've studied and where they've got their degree from. It's not the Bible way. Paul here in Romans chapter 2, very concerned about what you do, about what you say. And if you go over to the 3rd chapter, you have the description, which we'll get to here in a moment, when I want to contrast this with, or actually include it in Psalm 15 here in a moment, statements like in chapter 3 and verse 9. Well, let's start with verse 10. As it is written, Paul said, I'm not making this up. It's already written down. None righteous, no, not one. None who understands. There's none who seeks after God. They have all turned aside. Categorical statements here. They have together become unprofitable. There's none who does good, no, not one. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they have practiced deceit. The poison of asps or snakes is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways. In the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. You know, Paul wouldn't say this about animals. This is worse than the animal kingdom. This is terrible. What does this mean for us? Well, let's go to Psalm chapter 15. And I trust I'll make the connection for you here this morning. Psalm chapter 15. I'm going to read the psalm for you. Lord, Psalm 15, who may abide in your tabernacle, and who may dwell in your holy hill? He who walks uprightly and works righteousness, and speaks the truth in his heart, who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those who fear the Lord. He who swears to his own hurt and does not change, he who does not put out his money at usury, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. This is, of course, Psalm 15. Now, what does this have to do with what we're talking about here this morning? Well, here's the thing, and I really want to see if I can really make this point here this morning. I'm going to try as hard as I can to make it. When we're standing out there in front of the infanticide or feticide or baby sacrifice center, as we do from time to time, we can make the argument that the unborn child has dignity. Now, we'll not talk about a definition too much except to say specialness, if you will. The unborn child is not a mass of cells. It has dignity, but why? Why does it have dignity? Because we say so? Because we're standing out there and we've got our t-shirts and our sweatshirts and we say certain things on the t-shirts. We say this child has dignity. Is that why? See, here's the problem. We have gotten away in our educational centers, in our writing, and in our media. We've gotten away from the idea that there's dignity because God actually says so. He says so. Beyond the image of God. I mean, we know that we're made in the image of God. What does that mean? What do we do with a person who's made in the image of God? How do we do that? Psalm 15 addresses this. But here's the thing. Once you get away from the idea, the godly idea, that the image of God is why we treat people with dignity, with specialness. They're not an animal. They're not a worm. Once you get away from that idea, now, if you're going to have dignity left over, it's ascribed by man. A man says you have dignity, and crazy things happen. That's how we get with furries or cats in our public schools now, right? That's how we do that. Somebody says, well, I'd like to be a cat. They come in, they've got stuff drawn on their face or whatever, and of course, raise your hand if you'd like to be a custodian in a public school nowadays. You have to change the litter for the self-identified cats. Yeah, that's going on. That's happening. You know what? Once you give it over to man to decide who has dignity and who doesn't, there's no limit. And so you stand, as I was able to see this, I think a couple of years ago in Lidditz, here comes someone dressed like a cat, got a tail tied onto their back and so forth, right? And all these perverted sodomite people standing around saying, oh, you're beautiful. Oh, you're wonderful. Welcome. You're welcomed here. You see who gets to ascribe the dignity. Once you get away from God's word and God saying how we do this, it's left up to man, and anything goes. Any crazy, foolish, wicked, vile thing. But you see the value in that? You see the power that gives to people? Because if I can ascribe dignity to you because I said so, guess what else I can do? I can take it away just as easily. You see the power there? Well, Psalm 15 helps us here. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle, and who may dwell in your holy hill? What that should be now is a long string of people who are really good talkers, maybe good exegeters, maybe really good writers. That's what should follow. Did you pick up, as I was reading this a minute ago, it was all about people who do things. He who walks upright, the first thing. Then we have speaks uprightly. See how they're right beside each other? You better have both, because if you don't have both, walks uprightly and speaks righteousness, if you don't do both, you don't have either. You don't. We know this in families, do we not? Show me a dad who says one thing and does another. And I'll show you a child who will grow up and have the most difficult time believing the Bible. You have the most difficult time talking to that person about things of the Lord, and demonstrate to them that the Bible's true, that Christ is the only way. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Nah, they'll say, I've heard it, but didn't see it. There's another part of this, though, that I'd like to talk about. If we don't believe that people have dignity, if we don't believe that, then we're going to definitely treat certain people one way and certain other people another way. You know why? Because certain people deserve to be treated well and certain people do not. Now, that might be on various bases. We all know how we feel about racists, right? They deserve no respect. No one can really, in my experience, a racist is a very hard thing to define. It's not the easiest thing to define. I've asked people who've accused me of being racist, well, what is it? Very difficult. Very, very difficult. But in our society, racists deserve no respect. They deserve no dignity. In other societies, it's not based on what you believe. It's based on the station in which you were born. India, with its at one time obvious caste system, and now it's kind of a latent caste system. It's still there, although it's covered up a little bit. It's based on how you're born. And people in the lowest caste, the Dalit, I always don't know how to say it, Dalit or Dalit or however way you say it, they deserve less specialness than those who are born in the Brahmin class. But what do we do when we come to the Bible? Well, before we get there, again, a little bit of in my comments on Psalm 15, I want to point out something that Vishal Mangalwadi happened to say about this. And I want you to consider what's being said here. This is from a blog by Carl Johnson, who was interviewing Vishal Mangalwadi, and an Indian man, a very bright man who started out Hindu and became a believer and has written several books. This is from the blog. A question: what triggered the West's passion for scientific, medical, and technological advancement? How did the biblical notion of human dignity inform the West's social structure and how it intersects with other worldviews? How did the Bible create a fertile ground for women to find social and economic advancement? How was the Bible uniquely equipped in the West to cultivate compassion, human rights, property, and strong families? What is the role of the Bible in the transformation of education? All these are fair questions. Now, I want to go from Vishal Mangalwadi here briefly to Colonel John Eidsmoe when he's writing about he's writing about various law cultures, and he spends a little bit of time. I'll spend a brief amount of time on the Assyrian Empire and the Aztec Empire. Keep in mind that these are people that will assign human dignity very, very specifically. Not generally, specifically. And I even thought hard about saying this, and children here, but children are going to run into this eventually, and moms and dads, you might have to talk to them about these kind of things sometimes. Soldiers in the Assyrian Empire were rewarded for every severed head they brought in from the field. So much the aftermath of a victory generally witnessed the wholesale decapitation of fallen foes. Most often the prisoners, who would have consumed much food in a long campaign and would have constituted a danger and nuisance in the rear, were dispatched after the battle. They knelt with their backs to the captors, who beat their heads in with clubs or cut them off with swords. Scribes stood by to count the number of prisoners taken and killed by each soldier, and apportioned the booty or the rewards accordingly. The king, if time permitted, presided at the slaughter. The nobles among the defeated were given more special treatment. Their ears, noses, and hands and feet were sliced off, or they were thrown from high towers, or they and their children were beheaded, or skinned alive, or roasted over a slow fire. And that's the nice part right there. Things get uglier after that, which I won't read. Now, why am I talking about these things? This idea of dignity here, even to prisoners of war. We see this in the scriptures. The scriptures tell us how to treat prisoners of war. You see, when you and I are the ascribers of dignity, then we will naturally want to destroy those of whom we say have no dignity. That's what we will do. And so we've thrown the door wide open to torture and all manner of wickedness. But Psalm 15 puts a stop to it. And part of my purpose here this morning is to point out to you, hopefully, I'll do my best to try to point out to you that the Bible tells us the value of people and how we are to treat them, independent of our personal feelings about them. Independent of that. First of all, I want you to see something. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle and who may dwell in your holy hill? You know what? We are about to find out less about who may dwell in God's tabernacle and in his holy hill than we are about God. We're going to find out about God here. In other words, who does he want to fellowship? Or of what does he approve? And the rest of it pretty much is not so much about God. It's about our neighbors. It's about how we treat our neighbor. That's what the psalm is about. But the question that begins, if the psalm started out with, don't speak uprightly, work righteousness, and so forth. If it was just about that without that first question, I don't think we'd understand the point of the psalm nearly as much. It'd be like maybe a nice treatise about how we should be and so forth, but it goes so far beyond that with this first verse. Who may abide in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? And now we find out what God approves of in this brief psalm. He who walks uprightly, works righteousness, speaks the truth in his heart. Speaks the truth in his heart. What's that got to do with anything? Who cares what he speaks in his heart? That's his heart. Nobody sees that. Try to live without speaking the truth in your own heart. What does it look like when you lie to yourself consistently? Do you and I realize, do we get this? That when we get away from God and his word, we will be encouraged to lie to ourselves. We absolutely will. How many of us were, and I know I beat this drum, I'm going to beat it again because it's so easy. The COVID drum is easy to beat because it's so big and so wide. All you got to do is generally swing somewhere and you're going to be beating the COVID drum, okay? But we were encouraged to lie to ourselves. Some people knew that this was a lie, and you know what? You had to wear that silly mask anyway. You had to take that horrific jab. People knew it, but you can't keep your job. You can't remain in society unless you tell a lie to yourself and take that ghastly jab. Do you see the importance, the insight here of what's going on? He who speaks the truth in his heart. Because you know why? If you're willing to speak a lie, it's either going to mean the truth in your heart or a lie in your heart. If you're willing to speak a lie in your heart, you will be willing to speak it to everyone else and believe everyone else as well. The insights here in the scriptures are so amazing. Speaks the truth in his heart. Yeah, you could just read right past that. I got to read Psalm 15 today, whatever. Do we get the importance of that statement? You cannot get along with other people. You cannot have a society if everybody's willing to speak lies in their own heart and cooperate with those same lies. Theodore Dalrymple made this point, a doctor in England, who made the point that the reason why the communists are so good at telling outright lies is they're beating down your resistance here. And they'll just say the same lie over and over and over again until you start to believe it. And then at that point, you are putty in their hands. You've given up any kind of resistance to them. You've failed to speak the truth in your heart. This is such a critical thing. And going on, he who does not backbite with his tongue. And now we're going to focus here on the neighbors. Yeah, the neighbors. He who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up a reproach against his friend. And that friend and neighbor they're two different, the King James will say neighbor twice there. It's actually two different words. It appears as if the first word neighbor is like what we normally think a person who you're coming across or a person who is like near to you. And it looks like the second rendering there at the end of verse 3 seems more like like kinship, related to you. Has that idea more. Again, the two words are related, but they're not exactly the same. Again, I have to ask you, the psalmist starting out, who may abide in your holy hill? And you know what the psalmist is talking about? He's talking about how you treat your neighbor. I know I said this before. I hope you're not tired of it. But this is a God who cares about how you treat your neighbor. The false gods, they're all about what you do and say to them. They're all about that. God has plenty to say about how you worship him, and he has things to say about taking his name in vain. But he has not forgotten about how you treat his favorite creation, human beings, people. Do you see that dignity comes from God here? Do you see this? Do you see it? This is how you treat your neighbor. This is how you treat people with dignity. This is how you treat people that are made in my image. This is what you do about this. And I am positing for you this morning and presenting this, that if you do not have Psalms like this, and this is the only one, there's others as well. Psalm 24 is somewhat of a parallel, has parallel ideas here, and other Psalms as well, and throughout the Bible as well also. If you do not have this, you are left to treat your neighbor however way you want. And you can talk about dignity all you want, but you have no basis for it, except however you feel on a certain day, certain week, or a certain minute here. Talking about our neighbor. And verse 4 then. Oh boy, this might get us in a little bit of trouble in modern Christianity. In whose eyes a vile person is despised. I'm going to read it again. In whose eyes a vile person is despised, or King James condemned. Did you hear it? The person that dwells in God's holy hill despises vile people. Oh no. Oh no. No. Please, you don't say so. Oh, we just love and respect everybody. Yeah, that's how we would write this psalm, right? Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? Answer, everybody. This is Christianity in 2025. We're all welcome here. Not hardly. Don't forget it. God has some things to say about this. And here, in whose eyes a vile person is despised or condemned. But look, but he honors those who fear the Lord. Got a question for you. Can you honor those who fear the Lord and not despise the vile? Can you? Are you outraged at vile people? Or are you like, well, they're unbelievers, and we can't expect them to act like believers, and just forget. See, this is what we've done. We look at wickedness, and we don't despise the people that do these things. We don't. And that's how we've made peace with abortion, with feticide. We've made peace with our neighbors being attacked, their persons and their property being attacked. I heard a story this week, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, about your chickens. Somebody came to your door, is that correct? Yes, you. Yeah, the Canales. How many chickens do you have? Have 5 chickens? And somebody came to your door, all dressed in their CDC, Centers for Disease Control, booties, right? And all decked out in their white, staying away from all the germs, right? And came to your door and wanted to talk to you about your chickens. Am I right? Did I hear that correctly? I guess we're just supposed to get used to the outrages, right? I despise those wicked people that did that. I despise every one of them. I despise them. I despise the car they drove up in. I despise all the tax monies that they're robbing everybody else of. I despise them all. They're wicked people. Horrible. And you know what? I feel good about despising them. I do. How can I not despise them? Well, I'm supposed to you know what? Yeah, you know what? These people come dressed up. Oh, they're really concerned about their neighbors. They want to stop avian flu. Here's a little bit of insight. Nobody can be entrusted with doing something about avian flu if they're killing babies in the next room. They can't be trusted, okay? Do I want us to despise the vile people? Well, I don't necessarily. I might change my mind tomorrow. I really might. But the Bible doesn't change. And I don't see how it's possible to honor those who fear the Lord without despising vile people. I don't see how it can be done. You can kind of see why in our modern Christian culture, we stay away from the Old Testament. I mean, really, can't you see how, with our modern ideas, we come across a verse like this, that's a head scratcher. Man, I better keep reading quick. Psalm 23 is just around the corner. In 8 chapters, we're going to get to Psalm 23, and I can be all happy again. We cannot honor those who fear the Lord without being outraged at the vile things that are happening. You'll either be outraged at it or you'll make peace with it. One or the other. There's no third way to do this. He who swears to his own hurt and does not change. Man, do you see the basis of progress here? Do you see this? Was at a little session last week. I don't know much about the Boy Scouts of America. I seem to hear more. Apparently they're the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts now of America, or whatever, however way that works. But anyway, I was at a ceremony where a young man became an Eagle Scout, which is, as I understand it, the highest level you can attain in Boy Scoutdom, if you will. That's probably not the right term. That term, integrity, comes up a lot in the Boy Scout oaths and the Boy Scout handbook and so forth. And I got to thinking about this. I got to think about it in terms of Psalm 15. Integrity. And you and I have to understand how words change meaning and about how wicked people change the meaning of words on purpose. See, this is a statement about integrity. Who swears to his own hurt and doesn't change. That's what we used to mean by integrity. You know what we mean by integrity now? Got to be true to yourself at the moment. That's what I mean by integrity. You know, integrity means you used to be true to your word, what you promised, swears to his own hurt and doesn't change. You know what? I got into a deal I wish I wouldn't have, but I'm going to be good for my word. That's gone. That idea's gone. Now be true to yourself. You can't even do contract. You can't do anything if you don't understand this verse right here. Who swears to his own hurt and doesn't change. If you don't understand that, contracts are null and void, are they not? Yeah, I know I said I would do that. I said I signed that, but I have a different feeling about it now, and I'm no longer comfortable with that. So in order to have integrity and be true to myself, I'm not going to be held to some contract that we signed. Now, if you can't be held to a contract, you can't build, you can't do much of anything. You can pick up something in the store, cost $1.99, you go to pay for it, it's $10 now. You see that price in the store, that's like a contract in your mind, is it not? That's what it is. I'm going to pay $1.99 for it. Oh, plus tax. Yeah, throw another 12 cents on that. Yeah, no doubt about it. You see, Psalm 15 is this brief, just a short few verses upon which you can base civilization. And to abandon it is to introduce total chaos to every single thing. And wrapping up here, he who does not put out his money to usury, and of course the Old Testament has an awful lot to say about that. They were not allowed to charge interest to their Israelite brethren. And that's messed with too, because if you have a solid monetary system where you're not compromising the value of the coinage, it's a little bit easier not to put your money out at usury, because the coin that you lent to somebody is worth the exact same amount 10 years later. Listening to a song this week, and in the song, it turns out that someone left a tip at a restaurant, and the tip was a quarter. I remember that. I remember when a tip was a quarter. Yes, I'm that old. I was born in 1957. I remember when a tip was a quarter. And then we've introduced, of course, the Federal Reserve System. And why do we get, one of the reasons why you get the Federal Reserve? Yeah, to keep inflation at check, we were told, right? We were told we're going to put a stop to inflation. And in my lifetime, a tip has gone from a quarter to $5, maybe, probably more than that type of a thing. He who does not put out his money at usury, that assumes, I believe, a solid monetary system. Do you see what's being addressed here in this short, brief psalm, which I hope you grow to love? I hope you grow to love this psalm. Even addressing money, it addresses personal integrity, it addresses money, and it addresses what God approves of here. Nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved. And what's he mean by that, shall never be moved? Well, someone who swears to his own hurt. Someone who doesn't take a bribe against the innocent. Someone who speaks the truth in his heart. Someone who just will not listen to just any random rumor about someone without hearing the other side. Do you think that's a person that's easily manipulated? Do you think that's a person who you can easily talk to give away their freedom and their responsibility before God? Do you think that person's going to be an easy mark? Can you see how our institutions, our schooling, our entertainment, our news media are aimed at every one of these points? Every single one of them. They're aimed at destroying. And once you and I give up, you and I give up Psalm 15, at that point then we are an easy mark for any wicked person who wants to subvert and destroy us and wants to subvert us and our children. So what's our application here this morning? My application is that I hope all the scriptures are important here. But when a psalm starts out, a short psalm especially, with that question, Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle and who may dwell in your holy hill? It seems to me at that point then we should pay really special attention. If we want to be approved by God in our actions as our sanctification progresses, that's a time to really pay special attention, it seems to me. Who may abide in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? And it's good to really pay attention to what happens next, because God is serious about how we treat our neighbors. You know, in a Darwinian worldview, nobody has any dignity. Nobody does. It's just all ascribed and assigned and can be given and can be taken away at any moment. I was thinking this week about that, how we think of this evolutionary process as, animals and so forth. I had a conversation yesterday with a young man who wants to be married soon. And we were talking about this, and I said, some of my reasons for believing the Bible's inspired are different from other people's. Not that the other reasons aren't very good, and teleological argument and so forth. These kind of complicated, in some cases, arguments. Not that there's not a place for them. I said mine are kind of more simple. And I said, one of them is one man, one woman. In the Bible, God establishes marriage. He brings one woman to the man. And I said to this young man, it's an evidence for the inspiration of the scriptures, because no man would write that. No man, no godless man that I know of would ever write something like that. He'd write something different. One man for, I don't know, I know one, I was talking to someone this morning about this. I know one guy who advocates for polygamy, bigamy, if you will, and his, oh my word, and his tagline on his website or on some of his merchandise is 2 girls for every boy. I'm like, we have a math problem here, right? Generally speaking, in the way the world works, babies are pretty much 50% male and 50% female. So how are we going to do 2 girls for every boy here? If we do 2 girls for every boy for half the population, now we're doing 0 girls for every boy for the other half. Again, not being a math genius here, but trying to figure this out. And this particular person that advocates this, I think, sort of pretends to be a Christian. I'm not really sure. You see, here's what I'm saying. If we don't stick close to the scriptures, if we don't do this, anything is possible. Any wicked thing can possibly go on. Anything. And therefore, Richard Dawkins is correct, a famous, well-known atheist who still is with us. There is no meaning in the universe, just blind, pitiless indifference. That allows man to do his thing and ascribe value on his own whims, which is a disaster. God says something different. You want my approval? You want to dwell with me? Here is how you treat your neighbors. I get it that there's an awful lot of emphasis nowadays in some reform circles on ecclesiology, if you will. This is how you do your service. You know, you do this first, and you have this song, and then you have this prayer, and then I don't know, kneel, whatever. I mean, a lot of different things you do at different times. I'm not saying that's a bad study. The Bible talks about worship, and it's a legitimate thing to study worship. That is completely legitimate. But like Christ said in Matthew 23:23, yeah, you tithe. You tithe your small little spices, but you've given up on the weightier matters of the law, things that weigh more: justice, mercy, faith, these things. God says, who can dwell in my holy hill? He doesn't make it a matter of ecclesiology and worship styles and worship songs and worship patterns. He says, this is how you treat your neighbors. You treat them the way I tell you to treat them. You can dwell in my holy hill. Shall we pray?